This is the Topkats Rebel Connection. France extorting countries for billions of dollars over benefits of slavery and colonization. I said France is extorting countries for billions of dollars over benefits of slavery and colonization. Colonialism, as you may know, is an enduring stain in most of the world, and especially in Africa, which has 54 countries as of 2017, and the economic oppression continues to exist. There's an article that I came across that I want to share with you. It's from a good writer from a publication, and his name is Mawuna Koutonin. He's a peace activist and an editor of SiliconAfrica.com. This article called attention to an ongoing practice by which former African countries, all 54 now, are forced in some way to pay a colonial tax. And this particular article that I'm talking about is specifically referring to France. Oh, mighty France. Isn't that something? They're so powerful, even today, that France has to, extort money from smaller, more defenseless, easily controllable countries, which is pretty disgusting to me when you consider their public stature. In fact, France continues to thrive on the practice of extortion, which extracts, approximately $500 billion from African countries each year. They extract, and that's being nice. The word should actually be more of extort, bully, expressions like that, to the tune of $500 billion from African countries every year. And for those of you who have ever wondered why in the world aren't countries in Africa able to stand on their own 2 feet and get their economies running and people the necessities that they need for life, those that are interested, because not all countries in Africa are interested in the type of lifestyle that we consider here in the West, quote unquote, civilization. Believe it or not, there are many countries and the people in those countries around the globe who are not interested in the industrial, technological civilization that we have. $500 billion France is still extorting from African countries. As this article goes on to detail from Mr. Koutonin, his last name is actually spelled Koutonin. But he says that with his familiarity of the situations concerning the political environment, so to speak, it's more of a mafia-like environment to me, between many African countries, at least 14, he says that this outrageous tax which France charges to these 14 countries deprives African economies of much needed funds, exacerbates debt, and strips their authority over their own natural reserves. But the detriments are more than just economic, as the ills of colonialism manifest in social ways that are equally devastating to the dignity and identity of the African people on the continent. You see, according to the history, as shown and which can be easily accessed. Despite the years of African fighting to liberate themselves, France repeatedly used many ex-foreign legionnaires to carry out coups against elected presidents in Africa. This included Jean Bedel Bokassa, who assassinated David Dacko, the first president of the Central African Republic. In the last 50 years, a total of 67 coups have occurred in 26 African countries. I'll say that again. In the last 50 years, a total of 67 coups have occurred in 26 African countries, of which 16 are ex-French colonies. This indicates that France is desperate, to say the very least, to hold on to whatever land it has in Africa. But even on top of that, if I may also say, many of the African countries, 54 in all, are still controlled secretly on the down low. In March 2008, former President Jacques Chirac said, now listen closely. Former President Jacques Chirac said, without Africa, France will slide down into the rank of a third world power. And that, Chirac's predecessor, François Mitterrand, already prophesied in 1957 that without Africa, France will have no history in the 21st century. Now, as I alluded to earlier, as of January 2014, 14 African countries are obliged by France, to put it nicely, through a colonial pact, which they really had no decision or any way of not signing, not agreeing to this pact. The 14 countries, you have to agree to the pact. It is what they call being offered a deal that you can't refuse. Hint, hint. But 14 African countries are obliged by France through a colonial pact to put 85% of their foreign reserves into French central banks under French ministries of finance control. 85%. They are effectively putting in $500 billion every year to the French treasury. I must say that again. They are effectively putting in at least $500 billion every year to the French treasury. African leaders who refuse are killed, and this is according to history. This is not classified information. African leaders who refuse are killed or a victim of a coup. Those who obey are supported and rewarded by France with lavish lifestyles while their people endure extreme poverty and desperation. See, once again, there you have it. For all those who don't know that, now you know that. But this is nothing new. This has been going on for centuries. But this ongoing situation between France and these 14 African countries, this is the perfect platform and provides the perfect narrative to remind everyone and to teach everyone who needs to know and who have forgotten why nearly all of African countries, 54, are still under the thumb of Europe. Simply put, Europe is in control and calls the shots in Africa. France extorting countries for billions of dollars over benefits of slavery and colonization. My name is Q Pate, here on the Topkats Rebel. connection. And when we come back, I have a bit more about this story that, I hope that at the very least it's informative to you, and I hope that it's compelling enough that you will share this information with your friends and family. Thank you for stopping by. Well, now, this retroactive report here in 2017, August to be exact, the 8th month, while so many things are going on around the world, especially in reference to topics like this, countries having these very big monetary problems, political problems. Right now, what's ongoing, if you have not heard, are situations involving problems between the USA and some other countries and North Korea. Yeah, these countries always seem to have some type of problem. And one of the main reasons I would say, just on that topic right quick, that North Korea has been able to, according to the mainstream media, which we have to believe with a bit of salt, as they say, according to the mainstream media, North Korea has been able to pester and show all the bravado and the supposed power is because they possess nuclear weapons. And that is something that you will not see in any African countries. Most African countries, a very, very large percentage of them, I would say at least 90% of them, have very, very small capabilities militarily. And I don't think any of them, out of the 54 countries in the continent of Africa, I don't think any of them possess nuclear weapons. Not that that's something that I really would like for them or any country to possess, but that, like North Korea, is something that will keep your enemy at bay, at least most of the time, because they understand that you have the capability to perhaps destroy them. So, when a bully knows that you have the ability to fight back and very probably win the altercation, they normally leave you alone. But nevertheless, despite the two main African banks having African names, they have no military policies of their own. In fact, France allows them to access only 15% of the money in any given year. If there is a need for any more money, they need to borrow the extra money from their own 65% from the French treasury at commercial rates, interest rates. The pact that these countries supposedly have with France, the pact also includes clauses that Africa had an obligation to make French the official language of the country and the language for education, and an obligation to use French colonial money, which Nordic countries in Europe tried to unsuccessfully get rid of when they discovered this. Also, they were obliged to send France an annual balance and reserve report, and if they refused to send it, they would not be entitled to any money at all. Wow. So let me give you the affected African countries that France is holding monetarily hostage, so to speak. Please forgive my pronunciation of these countries, but the affected African countries since 1961, here all the way up until 2017, that France has in their grasp and by the throat is Benin, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Bissau, the Ivory Coast, Mali, Niger, Senegal, Togo, Cameroon, Central African Republic, Chad, Congo, Brazzaville, Equatorial Guinea, and Gabon. And by the way, France has also been holding these countries' national monetary reserves for at least 55 years, here in 2017. On top of that, in many of these French ex-colonies, all the major economical assets of the countries are in the hands of the French. Like, for example, all major utilities, including water and electricity, as well as telephone lines, transport, ports, and all major banks. And the same goes for commerce, construction, and agriculture, all controlled by the French. And the only way that we're going to see growth in the continent of Africa as a whole is by these European countries, and especially France, becoming independent, learning how to walk on their own. Because after all, if you and any other European country is so great, then why is it necessary for you to subjugate and to oppress and to bully and rob for your business interests? And please don't say because everyone has done it in the past. We're talking about the present. That's the subject matter. The present, as far as this subject matter is concerned. And by the way, right after I come back from this little vibe session, I want to give you some of the ways how Africa, the countries in Africa, as well as other countries around the world, are controlled and dominated by outside forces, whether that be European or not. But we're going to focus here, especially by European countries. Topkats rebel connection, edutainment wrapped in eclectic music. Oh yeah, the bullying has to stop, especially with these countries that walk around and act like they're so strong, act like they're so independent, acting like they're so capable of economical dominance, when actually in reality they're not as independent as you would ever imagine. And their leaders, especially France, the leader, Jacques Chirac, saying something like this: without Africa, France will slide down into the rank of a third world power. And that is probably an understatement.
Topkats rebel connection.
For some ways that you may need to learn about that countries use, especially over the last 2,000 years. Here are the ways that countries dominate and control other countries, and you can specifically attach this to France and the 14 African countries that they still control up until today. They are able to achieve this by enforcing sanctions, military might, the control over a country's military. They do this also by coups, overthrowing the government and that type of thing, as well as destabilizing the country economically. They create and or sponsor rebel forces which destabilize the countries. They perform governmental threats, harassment, bullying, assassinations. They also take over ownership and control of the utilities like water, like electricity. They control the ports, the maritime ports, where business comes in for importing and exporting goods. They control the natural resources, also diamond mines, gold mines, and this is most specifically in Africa because, Africa is saturated with gold as well as diamonds. Also, what Africa very much has in abundance is a substance called coltan, Coltan. And coltan is used in all computers. On top of that, they control the country's national monetary reserves, all the money that they have on reserve for the country, for which the currency is secured with, just to name a few. But we must remember that one of the most important things, if not the most important things, that these countries use, especially from Europe, because of the mainstream media, which they have a super control over, a super grip on, they control the narratives in the mainstream media. They control the propaganda. They are able to either put out fake news or real news. And most of the time, it's not real news that is reaching the people locally, nationally, and internationally. Again, if France is so great, why must they cheat, kill, subjugate, oppress, bully, and rob for their business interest security? And this is why you see such poverty all over Africa, that you see such corruption, because many of these leaders, if not all of these leaders, know that if they do not cooperate, then they will be replaced or worse. And many of them also figure, well, they'll get in and do whatever they can do, because as the old saying goes, if you want to change the game, you have to first get in the game. The links to the additional information for you to scrutinize will be in the information description area of this upload. My name is Q Pate, here with France extorting countries for billions of dollars over benefits of slavery and colonization. Thank you for stopping by.